All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to break down two of the absolute most fundamental building blocks in all of programming, variables and data types. I mean, if you've ever wondered how a game remembers your high score or how an app knows your username, you're in the right place. Trust me, once you get these two concepts down, you are well on your way to writing some seriously powerful Python code. So let's start with a really basic question. When you're programming, how do you get a computer to, remember something? It could be anything, a user's name, the score in a game, whatever. That little piece of information can't just float around in the computer's memory. We need some way to grab onto it, stick a label on it, and find it again later. And it turns out the answer is surprisingly simple. We just give that piece of information a name, a label. That's it. This simple act of naming things is the core idea that we're going to build everything else on today. Which brings us perfectly to our first major concept, variables. The easiest way to think about a variable is just like a container, or maybe a labeled box. You put some information inside the box, and you slap a name on the outside so you can easily find it later. Simple as that. Okay, so if you want the more official definition, a variable is basically a term that holds a piece of data. It acts as a reference or a label for that information. And here's the real key to understanding this. The variable isn't the data itself. It's just a friendly name that points to where that data is being stored in the computer's memory. So how do you actually make one? It's super easy. You just write the variable name, then an equal sign, and then the value you want to store. In this example, we're basically telling Python, hey, see this number 7? I want you to store it in a container and label that container firstNum. And this whole process has a name. We call it assignment. Now, of course, you can't just go wild and name your variables whatever you want. There are a few simple rules you've got to follow to make sure your labels are valid and, easy for you and other programmers to understand later on. The rules are pretty straightforward, really. A variable has to start with a letter or an underscore, never, ever a number. It can only contain letters, numbers, and underscores. And here's the one that trips up a lot of beginners, so listen up. Names are case sensitive. That means the variable age with a lowercase a is completely different from age with an uppercase a as far as Python is concerned. Okay, so we've got our containers, our variables, but what kind of stuff can we actually put inside them? Can we put numbers in there? Text? A whole list of items? Well, that's where our second big concept for today, data types, comes into play. Now, take a look at this. To you and me, the number 7 and the word 7 represent the same idea, right? But to a computer? Oh no, they are completely different things. The number 7 is something you can do math with. You can add to it, subtract from it. The word 7 is just a sequence of letters. It's text. They are fundamentally different kinds of data. And that is exactly what a data type is. It's just a category that tells the computer how to understand and work with a piece of information. Is this a number that I can use in calculations, or is it just text that I should display on the screen? The data type gives the computer the rules of the game. All right, you ready? Let's go on a quick tour of the most common data types you're going to be using all the time in Python. Think of these as the essential tools in your programming toolkit. First up, we've got the string, or str for short. This is your go-to for any kind of text. A single letter, a word, a whole sentence, you name it. The golden rule here, the one thing you absolutely have to remember, is that strings are always wrapped up in quotation marks. Next up, we have integers, or int. These are just your simple whole numbers. They can be positive or negative, but they have no decimal points. They're perfect for counting things, like how many items are in a shopping cart or what the score is in a game. But hey, not every number in the world is a nice, round, whole number, right? For that, we have floats. A float is just any number that has a decimal point. Think about prices or scientific measurements or percentages. If it needs that extra bit of precision, it's probably going to be a float. Okay, now this is where things get really powerful. A list lets you store a whole collection of items inside just one variable. You could have a list of names, a list of scores, pretty much anything. The key things to remember are that they're ordered, you can change them later, and they're always enclosed in these square brackets. And finally, we have the dictionary, or dict for short. This one is perfect for storing data that's connected using what we call key-value pairs. So instead of just a list of items, you can create something like a user profile. You look up the key name to get the value John, or you look up the key age to get the number 36. It's super useful. So we've covered variables and we've covered data types. But why does any of this really matter? Why is it so important to get both of these ideas? Well, it's because they work together. They are the absolute foundation of everything you're ever going to build. Look, if you remember one thing from all this, make it this. Variables are the what, they're the labels for your information, and data types are the how, they're the rules for what you can actually do with that information. You really can't write any meaningful code without both of them working together. And that's pretty much it with just these two concepts, labels for your data and rules for how to use it. You now have the fundamental building blocks for almost any program you could possibly imagine. So the only question left is, what are you going to create?